In giving you this presentation, I'm not always fond of doing a lot of PowerPoint stuff. I'd rather just talk with you. But there is going to be some PowerPoint because, you know, that's kind of expected. So anyway, as mentioned, I'm Sarah Van Boren, and I'm an employment specialist as well as independent living specialist with Independence Place. And in addition to that, I'm also a service-connected disabled veteran and disabled outside of the service-connected. And the one favorite thing, if I could say anything that I love hearing, is, "She don't look disabled." Yeah. So in the presentation, what I'd like to do is give you an overview about Independence Place and what sets us apart from other supported employment agencies, because that's not just what we are. Actually, that is a subset of what we do for our community-based services. And then from there, introduce you to what are called CILs, Centers for Independent Living, and talk about that a little bit, and then go in more depth into some of the services that we offer. And then if at any point you have questions, please ask, and kind of at the end too, leave the floor open for additional questions that it occurs to anybody. So to begin, before I go into this, there were a few things raised, a couple of points raised through the discussion and introductions, and those are all things that we actually touch on. For instance, able accounts, stable accounts. We don't manage them because that requires licensing. That's not something we do, but we can certainly provide you with one of the services. That's one of our services, is information and referral. You want an information dump on them? We can get you the information. Why everyone who is eligible should have one, whether it's built into a family trust or whether it's standalone, and that's an important aspect. Supported decision making. We work heavily with the Human Development Institute out of the UK to facilitate that, and all of our staff has been trained on it, and we are big advocates of self-determination and self-reliance. So while guardianship may be appropriate for some, our sense as a CIL, as a Center for Independent Living, is that's the last resort, or minimally intrusive as possible. So maybe, you know, just for finances or so forth. But overall guardianship, we've actually advocated against that in several cases that we actually handle, moving toward the supported decision-making model. Some other things that were touched on, you mentioned Chris Ryder. He's actually received our services. So we have, I'm not going to show him tonight, if I'd known that, I would have brought a video. But he's received our services and has worked with my colleague, Ryan Geiger. So with those things, that just gives you a broad panorama very quickly. Everything you brought up, that's all stuff we do. That's all stuff that we provide. Or think of us also as a hub and spoke. You need something, you don't know where to go, come to us. We may not have a direct answer, but we'll get you an answer, okay? And that runs the gamut of all things. Anyone can call. You do not have to have a recognized disability, and that is something we can do. So we have parents and caregivers and so forth call us all the time for a variety of different needs. Those are all the things that we can provide. So as our name states, Independence Place, and those three words underneath are absolutely the core of our belief system. So what I'd like to do is have you start off with meeting an individual that we've worked with, and this is Scott Bergenthal. So some of you may know him. His parents are very, very active in the autism community. And he's pictured there with Carolyn Wheeler out of UK and our operations director, Megan Coleman. So remember Scott, because we're going to circle back around to him in just a minute. So I'd like to show you more eloquently, far more eloquently than I can present to you. I'd like to show you Scott's story. So you might want to do the lights so quick. And you folks may not be able to see it real well, so. Oh, I didn't realize it. Hopefully you can kind of hear that.
Goldfish on a hook.
This is your favorite one?
Yep. I've got ideas.
Where do they come from?
My creations.
Every single day after school, he would get on his computer and start drawing. And you started doing this when you were about 12, right? The full movie animations.
Yep.
Right, so his full movie animations include multitude of chapters, up to 22 chapters, correct?
Yes.
And then each one of them always has a DVD box.
See, I make the cases.
You make those all by yourself?
Yes, after I made the credits.
So Scott has autism, and that impacts him in a lot of different ways. Autism is on a spectrum, and so everyone that has autism is completely different.
Scott has no physical disabilities, so that's not a barrier. His abilities cognitively are what hold him back.
There are some things that he just really loves that he's very focused on, so like Disney animations and things like that. You make yourself green eggs in the mornings?
And
Seriously? Wow.
green eggs and ham. We go through a lot of green dye.
Do you like green eggs and ham? I do not like them, Sam. I do not like green eggs and ham.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
All right.
He would work on the computer and show me his animations because he does create animations through PowerPoint. So there was a whole day we just spent on the computer so I could see how he did those and so that he could show me more about that and more about his passion, which is animation and Disney. Can you tell me what your dream job would be, Scott?
My dream job would be Disney animate.
You want to animate for Disney?
Yes. Yes.
Maybe yet this time. So I apologize. We have a couple of different versions of these videos that some are short and some run a little longer with a little more detailed story. So when we talk about disabilities, numbers very quickly include what you see up there. The number one across the spectrum functional disability is centered around mobility. And knowing that, this shouldn't be a big surprise. Does anyone know what the number one disability affecting most people is in the United States? Actually, it's kind of worldwide. It's not maybe what you think. It's arthritis. Doesn't that make sense with the 13% being mobility? So we see that all the time. So a much higher percentage of people have recognizable disabilities. They just may not claim them. And so that's important because what we see is a lot of dichotomy in the disability community, regionally and nationally. Nationally, it's estimated that 1 in 5 people have disabilities, but here in Kentucky, it's 1 in 3. the southern states lead the way. Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, all being in the top, that's 4 of them, but all being in the top 5 highest percentages of disabilities. It's almost, it's about, it goes right around 33 to 34%, depending on which state you're talking about. And that's attributed to a variety of different reasons. So the need for services in the disability community, I'm preaching to the choir, right? You know this. So, not a big surprise. Where is a SIL, Center for Independent Living, differ from other agencies that assist with a variety of different services? Well, that's just it. SILs are a national designation, and you can find them easily. We can provide you with the links if you needed to look at other communities. There are, and you'll see in just a minute, 3 of them in the state of Kentucky. And SILs came out of a social movement. And our founder, the individual attributed with the SIL movement is Ed Roberts. And an important element for SILs is inclusivity. Okay? And what we mean by that is exactly what it says. We work across all spectrums of disabilities. Our particular agency, and SILs in general, do not specialize in any one particular, like for instance, you may have an agency that just does developmental disabilities or just does spinal cord or TBI, and that's great. But for us, we do full spectrum, developmental, mental, physical, what have you. And more often than not, as many of you mentioned, you know somebody with co-occurring or multi-occurring issues and challenges to contend with. So we love Ed Roberts. Great story if you ever have a chance to look him up. Started off with polio and an iron lung, tried to commit suicide by passive eating, and then realized he could do something about his life. And his activism in Berkeley is what spawned the movement. And he's the one that got accessible everything because he had a mobile wheelchair. So fantastic story. So as I mentioned, the independent living movement came out of several social movements. So what's different is it is a social imperative, not a, oh, let's be nice to the people with disabilities and do something. No, it's like, you know, individuals contending with challenges and barriers and obstacles. They don't deserve, they merit. They merit equal treatment under the law, which is tailored to the individual. And that's a big component of our philosophy as well. So from those movements came this synergy and the development of SILs. And so SILs were basically founded in 1972. Okay, and they were codified and so forth. So what is unique about SILs, you can see the key components. We're all about the consumer. And the consumer, some people may refer them as clients, but we call the individuals we work with our consumers. And that's an important distinction because we're looking at them, you should be consuming our services. You know, you're not a client. So we want that to be a much more active mentality. So cross-disability, as I mentioned, and an important aspect that we underscore is the dignity of risk. So that goes along with what we were just saying about supported decision-making, self-determination, self-reliance, and again, that's what makes us a bit more unique is because the advocacy element that we'll go into in just a minute that is absolutely built into our services. So with Independence Place, that's actually my colleague Ryan, the one who worked with Chris Ryder and continues to provide support. Funny guy. Oh my gosh, he's so funny. Speaking about one of the aspects of our service, we have a specific charter that we must comply with nationally to be considered a SIL, among many things. But as an element of our structure and composition, a minimum of 51% of our board and 51% of our staff must have recognized seen or unseen disabilities. They don't have to have them declared, but they must have. So we have people in the field who contend with challenges, barriers, obstacles, and triumphs associated with whatever it might be. It could be the primary diagnosis, it could be the ancillary things that come along with that diagnosis. So with our staff, we have 83% of us, you'll see the picture in just a moment, have declared disabilities. And there's a great picture of our staff, great group of folks. This was taken just a couple months ago at our annual fundraiser. So those are the faces of the folks you'd be working with. And like to say, is our agency is small, but we're pretty mighty. We've got a lot of respective knowledge, and most importantly, a lot of compassion. That's really what I think sets us apart deeply. As I mentioned, there are 3 SILs in the state of Kentucky. The blue area is the service area for Independence Place, and we cover, I think that map is now out of date. I think we added one more county. I think we added Montgomery County in there. But we cover an 18-county service area. For me personally, the work that I do is primarily focused in Lexington, but one of my colleagues is focused up in around the Frankfurt area, and I certainly carry clients down in, or consumers, excuse me, down in Boyle, and we just added more service for Brevard County as well, because those more rural areas are not well served with supported employment services, which again, I'll get to in a bit. So any questions so far? Just kind of feel like,
I have,
sure.
so, we will disclose.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what was the question?
Program that's running there on Advocacy.
Yeah, that's still in Louisville, just closed.
So there is no one serving Louisville?
I think that the services are still there, I just don't think it's under that mantle any longer. I'd have to look into that and get back to you on that, so. Go ahead.
Wasn't it true that Independence Place used to, while it was headquartered in Fayette County, didn't serve me? Is that true? I remember that.
If so, it predates my working there,
Alright.
so,
But it does,
yes, oh, absolutely,
I
yeah.
think you're right.
Yeah.
5 years ago.
Maybe like 5 years ago, it was that long ago. Yeah.
But that's almost, I don't think any of the staff, as a matter of fact, I know none of the staff are even on board for 5 years ago.
That was like John
Wilson,
Wilson,
sir.
John Wilson, and
Oh, yeah, John
his
Wilson.
wife, they're all still.
Now that picture is, Willis has been our executive director for almost like 4 years now, stuff like that. And then,
You're kind of like a quasi or you're funded with the federal government.
in part,
Oh, in part.
Okay.
So what department? Is it HRSA or
good question. So our funding sources for our agency basically come from 3 different sources. We are grant funded, and that is both the federal and gives money to the state grant funds, and then the state distributes them. And then we have contracts as a supported employment services provider that is through the state. And I can get into those specific services a little bit more. And then we also do some fundraising as well, so and donations and so forth. So I know your dues are due, but we'll take donations.
so like
As-
voc rehab?
Yes, it comes down through Voc Rehab, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. And so that's where our supported employment services come for. And we actually bill, they subcontract to us, and then we are able to build upon delivery of performance. So, and the main thing too that is absolutely for everybody to understand, these services are no charge to anyone in the community. So there is not a fee associated with any of this. I don't like to say it's free, because it's not. It's not free because somebody is paying money for it. But the other thing too is if you want our services, invest something yourself, your time, your efforts, and so forth. And if you're not willing to do that, we may not be the agency for you because we're, as I said, dignity of risk, self-determination, self-reliance. We assist, but we don't do it for you. That's not our charter. So, other questions to this one?
I have a question.
Do you have to be,
Okay. Do you want to go ahead?
oh, you go ahead.
I just noticed there, Eastern Kentucky is white. Are you all going to be trying to get some of those white areas in the future?
Ideally, yes. It comes down to the main things, a question of funding and questions of capacity, is having offices. Our executive director, Willis, actually lives down in Bowling Green, and he's working on extending our reach there as a start. So, yeah, plans, we'd like to see the whole state covered by some color, but that's the challenge.
Yeah, because there's a lot.
There is a lot.
there.
There is a lot there. It does not help too that we had our, nationally they're called workforce centers or American Job Centers, but the Kentucky Career Cabinet, those got consolidated last year, and the offices all got closed and all consolidated into 12 areas. So not something we agreed with, but it hurt the workforce, the job seekers, I think, greatly, because it did take a service, a valuable employment service out of many of the areas, many of the regions. And so I hated to see that myself. And I have experience working in a workforce center, but in a different state, in a different, under veteran services capacity. So,
Question.
oh,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Do you have to be approved through both rehab in order to participate in the response?
No. It depends. And yes, it depends.
Okay.
So
You're
that-
talking about the individual seeking services, so you
Yes.
have to have a.
So where I'm at right now in talking about this is generalized services. What I think you're asking about are supported employment services, which I can get to in a little bit. If you are just coming in, we have a charter that's part of the grant funding. We provide these services to the community, regardless of the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. And those 5 core services. So I'll speak to your question, I'll answer it kind of as we go,
Okay.
because your question is actually a process question.
Can you
It's about
read those for me? I
Yeah.
can't see that.
So our 5 core services, any SIL, there are 5 core services, information and referral. We can do that for anyone and everyone. You call up, you're looking for a home health care provider, you don't know where to go in the community, we can send you a list. Now, we're not gonna call 30 of them for you, but we will provide you with information. Actually, Greg can speak to this a little bit too, because he works out of the HDI office where our office is located. You call up and you need an assistive technology device, or let's say you need an alarm clock for the hearing impaired. Well, we can walk down the hall and we can set that up. There's an online database that you can scope the database. We can send you the links to that. So anyone can get information and referral. You don't have to have a disability to do that. The other services would be catered to the individual with the recognized. When we say recognized, it does not have to be a physical diagnosis. And you can self-identify. You don't have to disclose to us at all what the disability is until you go later in the supported employment process. And that's a different area that I'll speak to in a little bit. So peer support. That might include talking to, let's say a veteran calls in. They usually refer the call to me because I'm the only veteran on staff. That's peer support. Having that, maybe they need information and they need peer support. It could be just talking with somebody that is contending with the challenges of managing disabilities in the workplace. Well, everyone on our staff does that. That's peer support. We can also connect people. Like I have one consumer who has cerebral palsy, loves bikes, most amazing mechanically gifted young man you've ever seen. And I've got another one who had one and doesn't know the business end of a screwdriver. So put those two together. They went to Bro Spoke with the bike together. That's peer support. Okay. We also have a peer support group called Friends for Life. That they do more social things. So we sponsor it, but we usually let them sort of self-manage it. So independent living skills. This is always an interesting one for me because many of the folks in the room have worked while their children or their loved one is going through school, elementary, and so forth. So the point is, a lot of times you're going to get life skills training. Is that fair? You've had life skills. So I've had a lot of people confuse what independent living skills are with life skills. What we consider life skills would be basic care. It might be hygiene. It might be how to dress yourself, brushing your teeth, being on a routine. Independent living skills are the next level from that, okay? And independent living skills would include such things as how do you live on the economy? How do you go find an apartment? How do you put in rental applications? How do you cook a meal? How do you do menu planning? It's a whole gamut of things tailored to the individual. And there are actually 9 different recognizable service areas under that we sort of categorize. Money and financial management, household management, vocational skills, and so forth. So independent living skills can be taught one-to-one. They can be taught in a group-based environment. Again, it's going to be tailored to the individual. It's really person-centered delivery of services. So individual insistence advocacy is the 4th item on the list. That may include assisting somebody with getting their SNAP benefits, not doing it for them, but advocating, going down to the SNAP office with them. It may be going to the Social Security office and helping them walk through to make sure that Social Security is doing their job. And hearing impaired people show up, not have an interpreter there, they're supposed to. So systems advocacy can also include global work. We work with local governments, we work with our regional consortiums, and we work with state government and cities across the nation lobby federally as well for assistance advocacy for the disabled community. So youth and adult transition, that is typically targeted, not typically, it is targeted at youth ages 14 through 22, and that is now also known as pre-ETS. So I'm sure that you've all heard that one, pre-employment training services. Okay, so those are all things we do. Questions so far? Does that answer your question about reading that out there? Okay. So,
What's the age range?
pre-ETS is 14 to 22. That's transition
Is
service.
that the same age range that you all serve?
We actually serve one-to-one for general services. We don't serve anybody younger than 18 because that's its own specialization. But if they're enrolled in a pre-ETS service through the school, then we work with them through that avenue. Is that the 18 and over? Does that help? Okay. So I spoke to information and referral just a little bit. So actually I spoke to it a lot. That's one of the core services we offer. Again, you need a ramp, adaptive ramp for your house. We can hook you up with that. It really just depends on the individual, what they need. And I mentioned you need information on ABLE accounts. I've got a whole prefab kit sent. You're going to be information overload with details about ABLE. So not all of us are subject matter experts, so I'm not a subject matter expert on the Social Security Administration. Ask any Social Security Administration representative, how long does it take? They'll tell you 5 years before most of them are comfortable in their jobs. So we don't have time to do that, but we can direct you through a general process. If you need an advocate who's going to represent you on an appeal, we've got people we can refer you to that we've worked with that can certainly represent you.
What if someone is homeless? Can you help in that area?
Yeah. So we are not a sheltering agency because that's in violation of the SIL, so we do not run any residential services. but we can help individuals looking for apartments or if they're facing eviction. Certainly that falls under the domain of information and referral. It's pretty much anything you're gonna need. We try to do community connections through that.
And some like the legal services as well.
We're not licensed for legal services, but I can refer you over to, and then, as an example there, if you need guidance on the expungement process, it just so happened that the attorney, who is the standard bearer for expungements in Kentucky, shared our space when we were still at the planter. So we have a direct connection with him. He's actually merging his law firm. So certainly we can refer people to appropriate providers. We can't always vouch necessarily, but we can start with, or through the attorneys that we do know and have worked, we'll often go to them and say, who do you like for this, because that's not your specialty, because they're much more networked into their own than we would be. Does that speak to your question?
Oh, I was just talking
Okay.
Legal service in a criminal sense. I was thinking about advising the wills and power of attorney and that kind of thing. Yeah,
that because none of us are JDs, and trust me, most JDs are not going to work for a small nonprofit. So, we're not licensed attorneys, but we can again point in the direction and generalized things like working on expungements or the difference between supportive decision making and guardianship, things you might need to do to represent yourself for Social Security Administration, filing. Generalized stuff, a lot of times we can point the direction. Okay. So as I mentioned, peer support, that's another of our core services. Yeah, that's all right.
What if the person is not English? Do you think that the interpreters or a person with a disability
You can get them. We don't currently have anyone on staff, and depending on the services that they're provided, and what program they're enrolled in. As an example, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation would provide interpreter services. Okay. We can also do systems advocacy because in any medical situation, any legal situation, the providing agency under the Americans with Disabilities Act must provide that service. So that would be something else that on information and referral, we handle a lot of inquiries about the ADA and so forth. So for instance, service dogs versus emotional support animals.
Versus therapy dogs. The three, there's a difference.
Well, and the thing is, emotional support animals can be therapy dogs. Service dogs can be therapy dogs. There's a lot of cross-pollination with them. So as I mentioned, independent living skills training covers 9 different life skill areas, and we ask, well, how do you do that? Well, you need it. You need help cleaning we're not going to clean your apartment. Trust me, we've had people expect us to do that. But we're going to go in and maybe work one-on-one with the individual to help them learn a system for housekeeping, help them learn, organize your bills this area. You need banking help. Well, let's learn how to use an app on your phone for that. Any of our staff can provide area. Now, I'm recognized as one of the better cooks, actually the best. But so I do a lot of the training there as well, and so it just really depends. At one point in my career, I was licensed in Series 6, 7, and 26. So with financial services, they kind of default to me for help with budgeting and stuff. So. As I mentioned, individual insistence advocacy. We really focus on the individual working toward being able to do this themselves. And again, that may be us going to the SNAP office, but eventually it's allowing the person to learn through observation and stuff. Because if they don't have somebody providing modeling behaviors or guiding them, how are they going to know to do this? And quite frankly, how many of you parents have been rejected by your children? I can do it myself. They won't listen to you, but they might listen to somebody else to give them a little guidance and latitude. So, as I mentioned, youth and adult transition. Pretty straightforward. 14 to 22, it's a prescribed state program. We can also work with individuals on a one-to-one basis over the age of 18 for that. So if they've not been in a pre-ETS program, but they need help with transitioning from high school into college, from high school into the workforce, or depending on the age range, college into the workforce, we can help with those transition services as well. So one of the big questions are additional programs. I focused on the broad scope. What gets probably the most, many times what's not understood in the community is that supported employment is a separate functionality. An agency can provide supported employment services and they would not necessarily be a SIL. Okay? So there are about 5 or 6 supported employment service providers in the Lexington, Fayette area that service multiple counties as well. But they don't have the same charter that we do. Theirs is going to be different. So I'll get back to that in just a second. So we also have a soup closet that we carry for men. We get donations of business clothing items typically. And anyone is welcome to come in and look if they should need the soup for something. There's no guarantee of sizing, but it's all in good repair, and that's no charge to anybody who might need that service. We do some ADA consulting. We're all trained through the CETA, that's the Southeast Americans with Disabilities Office out of Carolinas, that cover our 7-state region. And then the Persist project is actually pre-ETS. That's the official name of it. Okay, let me see where we're at with this. Okay, so I want to go deeper into the supported employment service because that's one area that a lot of people don't have a very good understanding of, perhaps, or they just need a little more detail. But before we go there, I want you to meet one more person that we've worked with. And we'll link back to Scott in just a minute. So I'm going to do the lights one more time if we can. So, sorry for the volume. If we need to turn off the AC to, I didn't realize I didn't have a speaker on here. Okay, there we go.
Anxiety can be crippling. Hallucinations. I'll need more support. Let me think. Oh, I remember one time that my homebound was teaching me, I'm trying to do my work and there's like 20 other just people and animals in the room just screaming, and I'm trying so hard to focus, and it's going, and I'm like, I can't, yeah.
It's just hard. It's hard to see your friends' kids go on through middle school and high school, going to dances, going to prom, hanging out with their friends, and seeing your child, just, her goal is to get to go to school every day.
People just treat you more gingerly, like you're gonna break, and just treating like I could snap.
She saw a rabbit with a man's face following her. I kind of had almost like a punch in the gut feeling, kind of a cold, I'm going to be sick feeling, because it struck me that she believes this is real. Something is going on besides depression and anxiety. So I called her psychiatrist, and she was diagnosed with childhood onset schizophrenia when she was at the end of 6th grade.
people knew that I was hallucinating. And like, once people knew, I was kind of the girl that went crazy, you know?
I am not really good at pushing her to get outside of her limits. And that is where Independence Place has been great. Because Sarah came in and sat down and saw Meg, not as the child I had who had this illness that changed her and now she has these issues. Sarah saw Meg as this bright, eager kid who wants to work, who wants to figure out what they want to do with their life, and needs help getting there.
What I would like to see, what I endeavor to do, is to assist, aid, support, advocate, cheerlead, cajole the consumers to really build that self-confidence, the faith in themselves, that they have the inner strength to aspire, to achieve, to extend themselves, to push their own boundaries.
And ironically, Meg wound up with this job not by applying, but Sarah set up a informational visit with Beth, who owns Sweetly Lou's. And Meg left that informational meeting with a job offer. So that was pretty awesome. That first week, and she only worked 3 days, I saw just a huge jump in maturity. Her focus wasn't just getting up and hanging out. It was getting up and mentally preparing herself to go to work.
Having a concrete belief in one's self-worth, that they're part of a bigger whole, that most importantly, there is a future and they have a place in it, is fundamental to a purpose-driven life, if you will. Oh, it's constantly busy. It's a thriving small business. It has amazing contacts in the community. Does a lot of catering events, so there's always work being done. In Megan's case, she's kept busy, and that focus actually allows her to mitigate the symptoms of her schizophrenia quite effectively, because with focus, she's not giving as much energy or attention to the auditory and visual hallucinations that she has.
You got me on the spot, Mom. Without Independence, I probably wouldn't be as social. I'd still be a nanny, and I wouldn't have a job, and I wouldn't be this independent. Is that good?
Okay, that's sweet Megan. We love her so much. So where her story is important and where it intersects with Scott is actually we had Sweet Lilu's, a small business in Versailles. We had them cater our fundraiser, and Beth Hensley is amazingly supportive of the community and has been of our agency. So Megan's been working for her almost a year now. No, actually it's next month. Sorry, it's July. So we had talked with Beth about the possibility of bringing on another individual, and that happened to be Scott. So Scott started working there, this is June, so he started working there in mid-May, and guess who trained him? That was Megan. So Megan was queen of the baking aisle. She could turn out brownies like nobody's business, and that's through a lot of work and support that she'd had. And I actually shadowed her, actually did a lot of the work in the kitchen for them because I knew my way around a commercial kitchen. So Beth brought on Scott and turned the training over to Megan, and it worked out beautifully. Scott has now become one of the cookie kings. So he did work for the University of Kentucky in the food service area for a while, and he upgraded to a small business with more autonomy and more direct applied work experience for working in a very, very busy small work environment. What's pretty cool about Beth's staff is amazing. About Megan, this didn't really come out. I didn't realize the extent of it when I was working with her. She also has bathophobia, which is, I can't remember which side it comes on. It's either fear of stairs or fear of climbing stairs. There's a distinction with them. So Beth's primary office was on the second floor of a Civil War era building. There's no elevator. So we worked with her because she had to go up there to bring things down and then also to clock in and stuff. So over the course of 3 weeks, we got her going up and down the stairs. Now mind you, she about broke my hand a couple of times punching it so hard. But the staff helped, and when she was doing it, high-fiving her, working up the stairs. So that element of community support is absolutely mission critical. And that is part of what our charter is under supported employment services. So, I want to be respectful of time too, because I know we got a bit of a late start and see.
Okay. I've got to later.
Okay. So let's talk about supported employment services a little bit. I don't really need this up anymore, so I'm going to close this down if that's all right with you. Or I can put on the Independence Place screen. Actually, let's do that. So what did you guys think of those videos?
Oh, they're so wonderful.
They were remarkable.
Yeah.
Pretty cool, huh? Yeah, they tell their stories a lot better than I possibly could. So that gives you an insight as to what we do.
Oh, about the first video, the one guy, he did work on animations, right?
Yes.
I'll just let you know I'm an animation enthusiast.
I've been giving your dad some insight on some stuff to do for you. So I know you, but I don't know you yet. Let's put it that way. Okay. So let's talk about supported employment, because that's an area that a lot of people don't have a very good understanding about how it works and where we fit into that picture. So on the one side of the house, we have our umbrella as a sill, and the public area, and this is going to speak to your question, is independent living skills. So those areas of support fall under that. Vocational training can fall under that. That is not supported employment. It has a huge amount of overlap, but it is not supported employment. Supported employment is a state-mandated process that all supported employment providers must follow. So vocational skills, if an individual were not enrolled under supported employment, I'll speak to that in a minute. Let's say they needed a little bit of help with filling out an online job application. We can help with that. They want a resume review, or they don't have one. One of my many mad ninja skills is I'm the recognized, by far, I'm the oldest, you can tell from the pictures. I'm the oldest one on staff, but I also have the most work experience, and most work experience in the employment-related field, not in social work, in the employment-related field. So if an individual needs some coaching on practicing for interviews, that falls under vocational services. Again, all of that translates over to the supported employment field. That's where it's the same service. It now just becomes who's paying for it and what is the level of intensive services received. Intensive services are going to be what is known as the supported employment. Those require enrollment and approval through the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. And the great thing is, even though there have been budget cuts in other areas, something shifted, something happened. Maybe somebody finally did the math right in Frankfurt. But they actually fully funded all tiers of disabilities. So there are 5 tiers under the supported employment process for interview. And the OVR counselor makes a determination based on diagnoses and interview, a whole bunch of factors. What tier does that fall into for the individual? One being the most severe, most impactful type of disability, interfering with somebody's ability to work, function in society, and so forth. Prior to about 3 months ago, only tier 1s were approved for supported employment. Now, all tiers are open, okay? So, typically what I've seen, individuals with autism tend to fall in tier 1 anyway. And I do work with some of the individuals with autism. Scott's not my client, he's Megan's client. But I have 2 other individuals on my caseload, actually three now on my caseload on the autism spectrum. So supported employment, it is a process. An individual can self-refer into the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation for those supports. So you can go in and say, I have a disability. That's when it has to be disclosed. At that point, when you are seeking services, you actually have to have it under OVR. You have to have it documented, diagnosed, or be willing to have it documented and diagnosed, because that is mandated again for those services. That's how they're funded. We don't determine that. So we can be a referring agency. So if you come in and you say, I'm looking for independent living skills services, and we go, wow, you've got a lot of barriers, you might benefit from going through OVR. Here's the difference. Let's say you come in and you want to work as a certified nursing assistant. We can't pay for the training, but OVR can. We can't pay for your stethoscope and scrubs, but OVR can. Okay? So let's say you want to go into construction trades. Again, we can't supply work boots and so forth, but OVR can. And then OVR can pay for the additional level of intensive delivery of services. So when we talk about that, what that means, again, it's a state mandated process. You refer into OVR through whatever conduit. Now, if we refer in, there is no guarantee that we would be the assigned agency. That is the determination of OVR to a point. You can demand, as the consumer, which agency you want to work with. The exception to this is if you have already received services previously, they typically designate the originating service provider because they've already paid for them. But if you haven't received services yet, or they haven't paid for anything yet, you can actually choose which agency you want to work with. But most people don't know that. You can advocate, and I've had people come in and talk with us, and then when they have their OVR interview, will self-advocate to come back to us. We have no jurisdiction over that whatsoever. And I'm not pushing for it, I'm just saying that that is how you can make a determination as to which of the agencies you want to work with. From there, if you are assigned, there's kind of 2 conduits. I'll speak to the most broadly used conduits. You get referred back to a supported employment agency. Every single one of us has state mandated training that we have to go through. We have continuing education units we have to acquire each year. So what distinguishes them, the services, is more than anything the delivery and the style. You just got to look at our style and our delivery. That's the best endorsement I can get. So this is not a sales plug, trust me. We're, like I said, a small nonprofit, but it's just, I'm very proud to work for here. I actually had, when I came to Lexington, I had 2 job offers, and I'm so grateful I came to work for Independence Place. So, okay, so you get referred in. That starts the process. The referral comes to us. We will set up an initial intake meeting because you've already had one with OVR. They've designated your case, they've done a review, they might have required you to take some tests and so forth. I believe they have up to 60 days to review your case. I know that the Lexington Frankfurt offices tend to be much, much faster. I've seen turnarounds done in as few as 2 to 3 weeks. And typically once it's done, the referral comes to us in 1 to 2 days. I mean, sometimes we have consumers calling us before we've actually got the paperwork. So the reason for that is that the rural counties tend to be spread very thin for OVR staff, and there is a lack of service providers in those. So those tend to take longer. to get those referrals back, to get them back, referred back to us. So there are 3 parts to a supported employment process. The supported employment process starts with discovery. That can take up to 75 days or longer if it's been okayed. That is exactly what it says. The time is to discover everything we possibly can about the consumer we're working with. And in Megan's case, as a good example, this was just an outing with her, and we were talking about what we like to do, and I was telling her about cooking and stuff. She goes, oh yeah, I love to make cupcakes and cakes with my mom used to do this. And we don't do that so much anymore. I'm like, what? There you go. That led us to a discussion about, well, have you ever considered cake decorating? The example too that I like to give with that is I asked her at any, because a family member was advocating for her to go, well, just get her a job at Kroger. Just get her a job at Kroger. And I turned to Megan and I said, at what point did you ever say, Mommy, when I grow up I want to stock shelves at Kroger? Now for some individuals, that's exactly what they want to do. Great, but let that be their determination, not an overbearing, concerned loved ones who has a preconceived notion about what the abilities of their child are or the abilities of their brother are or whatever. Let us work on that. I've been at this a few years. I know a few things. So, so discovery starts. We're not really actively looking for a job because it might be remiss of me to try to plug somebody into a field that they have no interest in, no aptitude for. So, the other important element too, a lot that goes into discovery is expectation management on both sides. And I've had an individual who had intellectual disabilities who absolutely insisted on becoming a police officer. He'll never pass the exam, so we had to steer him toward other conduits that would allow him to have the things that appeal to him from that, and manage his expectations from there. So discovery goes on. From that discovery, and what's great about our agency, we can do pretty much anything that the individual wants to do. You want to go sit in a coffee house, play board games? Let's go sit in a coffee house, play board games. You want to go check out an art museum? You want to go look at the county fair? Let's go. That's all part of discovery. So I tend to not ever want to meet in the office because that's sort of my territory. That's not neutral ground. That's not, you know, especially exciting or stimulating to do that. We try to avoid that. And we really get out and about. So if an individual has transportation issues, we all drive. We go pick up the individual, or alternatively, they need some help navigating on the bus, we'll help with that too. So we have a lot of flexibility. We're also not bound to meet between the business hours of 8 and 5. I often meet later evening, if that works for family members. Occasionally I'll do weekends, but I've been told to stop that, so I've been stopping that. So there's a lot of flexibility in doing discovery. And once we have finished discovery, the specialist will prepare and submit a report based on what was found in discovery. My reports are epic. I try to get to know as much as possible. My reports are under 14 pages or so. And they cover everything, as much as I can possibly cover. That gets submitted to the OVR counselor. They review it, and in there it's going to be recommendations about occupational fields. That's its own discussion too, but generally speaking we'll make recommendations. And sometimes it may include specific employers. In Megan's case, we had this developed and boom, she was off to the races. Then we seg into the job development phase. And under discovery, we have to have a minimum of 10 contact hours with the individual. And that can be through email and phone. I prefer to do at least a minimum of 10 face-to-face with somebody, but sometimes that's not always possible. And some individuals require more. I had one that had 40 contact hours. She was just, that's what she needed. So then we move into, from there we move into the job development phase. The OVR counselor will prepare the individual plan for employment, the IEP, depending on who you talk to, but they're the same. And that gives us the green light to begin searching for jobs, facilitating relationships with community contacts through jobs. Sometimes it's tailored employment. You saw with Megan, that was tailored for her. They were able to, as a small business, adapt the work to what she could handle and successively increase her responsibility level as she integrated into the workplace. Some are not quite as cut and dry. A lot of times at presentations, you'll see these get held up as, oh, this is the way it is for everybody. No, not really. I mean, I have done 2 placements at Kroger, and the guys are happy to be there. That's great. That is, employment that they wanted, and so we worked to facilitate that for them. But still took them through the process. So job development can last. It can be a quick turnaround. Alternatively, it can take 2 years. There's no magic number there. It really just depends on the individual. I've had one individual in discovery for a year because she's chronically homeless, and she disappears every now and again. So we can't get that done. So we finally wrapped her up last week. Once job development occurs and the individual is placed in, has employment, I want you to understand this is competitive employment. These are not gimme jobs. These are not make-work jobs. That's a different discussion. Don't care for sheltered workshops. That is completely against the charter of what a SIL is. So this is competitive employment on the economy, tailored to the individual. Once the placement occurs, then we go into what are called long-term supports. So we have benchmarks of 30, 60, 90 days, and after 90 days of managed, maintained, sustained employment, OVR will basically close the case. Good, successful completion of their charter. We don't. We continue with long-term supports. So let's say 3 months down the road, an individual is running into, now if they've developed some job skills or what have you, they might be running into some conflict resolution issues. We're there to help, okay? Let's say a year from now, they've been happy in their job, but they want some additional advancement, so they start wondering if maybe looking elsewhere. We can either come into that employer and negotiate something with them on their behalf, or we can start looking for other placement. Or in terms of a longer term plan, some of the consumers I work with do actually are at a level where we don't just work on occupational development, we actually work on career development. And career development is a much broader, longer term plan that involves education, training, certifications, whatever it is depending on the field. Okay, that's not for everybody. Again, I keep stressing tailored to the individual. And then the long-term supports stay with the individual for as long as the individual elects to use services. So the individual can return to OVR and request additional services. They can, but they have to go back through the application process again, and there are some conditions on that. But that, in general, is a supported employment process. So, questions on that? Please.
For folks that have got younger children that are kind of at age 18, how would you be someone that they could invite to the IDP meetings?
Sure.
To open a case or to be a part of that process?
Yep. Yeah, I've actually attended when somebody's come in. I've actually gone to the initial intake meeting and so forth. And yeah, certainly with the IPE for younger
And you
people.
could come as early as age 14, I guess.
Mhm.
Kind of transition.
Yeah, just to advise, that falls under our ILS side of the house, independent living skills, under the 5 core services. So absolutely, that's systems advocacy actually. So, other questions I can answer for anybody?
Just in general, how many clients do you have or consumers?
Boy, Megan just did. The gal that you saw working with Scott, that's our operations director. Right now, I think our caseload is around 135 total spread across. We keep our caseload smaller, so we don't get occupational burnout. or compassion fatigue, or systems fatigue. We do not work over 40 hours a week. Wink, wink. I do, but because our executive director is very supportive of us having our downtime too, because this is a fatiguing, caregiving profession. So on my caseload right now, I've got 22. So, and not all of them they're in various phases across. So some of them are lower maintenance than others. When they're in long-term supports, once a month check-in. Hi, how you doing? Great. Need anything? I need help moving. Sorry, I don't do heavy lifting. So, other questions? Does that answer that for that? So,
You were talking about guardianships and trying to limit those to, last resort. Do you prefer limited guardianships or none at all? What is
it really, again, as a SIL and as somebody who's worked in this field, self-determination is hugely important. So there are things to consider. Guardianship has its place, but what we have found is that too often it is the place of first resort rather than last resort. When you think about guardianship, think about this. You are taking somebody's civil rights away. Bottom line. And guardianship can have many tiers, as you mentioned, and it can go so far. Full guardianship, I work with an individual with intellectual disabilities, but because of his behavioral issues, and he has no caregiver in his life, the state is his caregiver, he's under full guardianship. He cannot vote. He cannot sign his name to a job application. I actually got reamed for submitting them without telling. I'm like, but he's in supported employment. Of course we're going to submit job applications. And it was just a miscommunication. So where it's appropriate, and our philosophy would be, are all avenues, have they been adequately explored and the decision made appropriate to the individual? Because here's the challenge. Once you're in guardianship, it is darn hard to get out of it. It's very difficult. The courts don't like it. They still have a very archaic view of individuals with disabilities, oftentimes, and it can be very challenging to remove a guardianship and allow somebody to be back under self-determination. They're starting to get wise to it, but it takes and very few people have the time, inclination, and resources to reverse a guardianship, because that takes quite a bit. So I know that's a generalized answer. Our thing would be to build up the individual's resiliency factors, decision-making team, make sure they have the supports, and then hopefully facilitate if guardianship, like financial guardianship is probably the least invasive, and that might be for the individual appropriate. But our thought too is the person teachable? Let's teach them how to do it. Let's try that first, because again, guardianship is a road that's very difficult to come back from.
So is financial guardianship a form of limited guardianship?
Yes. Yeah.
And under that sort of guardianship, are some of the decision-making abilities preserved for the individual?
Oh, yeah.
Such as voting?
Yes, voting is the last tier. Voting and decide. But remember that guardianships, they can, right now, if an individual were under full guardianship, you can't vote, you can't sign your name.
That's
you can't,
not true.
You can't vote.
You can vote.
It has to be reinstated.
No. When you go to the judge in the first place, he will ask you, do you want to retain voting rights or not? And you say yes or no. The person who you're going for guardianship says yes or no. And
okay, and again, that's a ruling. If there is no ruling, the voting rights are gone. Do you see what I'm saying? That's a ruling on the judge's part, but they can be stripped. And more often than not, folks don't know under guardianship that that's happening. Because oftentimes, like my deaf consumer, the case manager with another agency was pushing his parents for guardianship and didn't fully inform them what that meant. And they were trying to backdoor it. So guardianship often occurs that way too, which So I'm not disagreeing with you, but it's a ruling on the part of the court, yeah.
Power of attorney is another option that needs to be explored, so if you're competent enough, you can give
Yeah.
somebody else the power that you use on all your rights.
Absolutely.
So that's
And power of attorneys are all the time for anything. I mean, deployed service members, I had them when I was active duty and
So
stuff,
no
so.
guardianship involved, just.
Well, but you
No.
can still,
Power of attorney, somebody backed on your back.
I know there's, training on that, yes.
What is the new statute?
And also you can retain the right to get married, I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you can't do it, again, those are, what I'm saying is the most extreme forms of them, but they have to be granted back or they have to be done at the time of the hearing. And most folks don't always know how to self-advocate to get these rights preserved and then restoring them. But it's determining where you live, who you can live with. I mean, it can be extremely restrictive. Now, mind you, I'm also giving you the most extreme case of it, but these judgments are so often made without participation on a caring person. They're
Are you
just
comfortable with limited guardianships?
Oh, if, any guardian, if it's been properly explored and tailored to what the individual truly needs. I'm not averse to, like my individual with intellectual disabilities, he thought shooting windshields out of parked cars with BB guns was a good idea. He doesn't have that judgment center to make good, responsible decisions. And it didn't occur to him that what's fun for him was very costly and dangerous and everything. In this case, I would say, yeah, guardianship's totally appropriate because he can't be self-determinant and he's high risk for negative influences, drugs, alcohol, illicit sex, exploitation, and so forth. So, yeah, in his case, absolutely. But somebody who's competent might have, what we try to distinguish is if an individual is making decisions that you don't agree with, it doesn't make them incompetent. That may just make them inexperienced. And it may make their priority system different than yours. So that's what we try to make the distinction. You may not agree with a decision, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their right to decide should be taken from them, from the individual. So.
And of course, a lot of that depends on the guardian, I would think.
Absolutely.
Informed guardians are better than people who are just playing guess what.
Yeah, absolutely. And understand that the perspective we're coming from too as a SIL, we often don't see engaged family members or engaged caregivers who become part of that process. You guys have a unique enclave, if you will, here, where you've got such community support. Trust me, I've emailed Mel a whole lot saying, hey, I need to know, what do you do? That's part of our resource. So we consider ASBG part, and I refer people out to this group quite a bit for questions around autism and handling that. So again, we're not averse to guardianship. It's got to be person appropriate. So.
And the guardianship statute itself requires you to explore lesser restrictive guardianship.
Yeah, and unfortunately that does not happen a lot. Like I said, my deaf consumer, he's down in Danville.
Yes.
He was getting end-arounded. Didn't even know what was going on. So fortunately, his mental health care provider who had to sign off was absolutely not going to. That was good. So.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. So.
On the point I wanted to make, going back to the power of attorney aspect, one of the things you really should keep on talking to your clients about is having a medical power of attorney, which is different from just a general power of attorney. And for a lot of family members and parents who do not have guardianship, in a medical setting, the HIPAA laws require that information to be private. And once they're over 18, unless there's a guardian or a medical power of attorney, parents or caregivers have absolutely no control over medical decision making. And when you're ill, this is not a good time for supportive decision making because you're still
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm working with a gentleman who's in his 40s, and suffered a TBI 5 years ago, so his family is still working with him as he recovers 5 years later. So, and that's where the medical power of attorney came in. For a little while, they were hamstrung while he was in a coma. So it can happen at any age, not just, for 18-year-olds. It's, can happen at any age. So it's always a good idea to have that. And, and power of attorneys can be very, very, very specific. You can make them, any parent with a school-age child probably should have a power of attorney for a caregiver because if something happens for your kid. And it can be a 9-month expiration date on it. That's a pretty standard one. It can just be you do a limited power of attorney if somebody sells your car for you. The DMV has a standard form you sign as power of attorney, and it's just for that one transaction. So it just really depends. So, all right. Anything else? Other questions or? All right. I don't bring handouts because people tend to not read them. I actually prefer to steer you to our website, and then also you're welcome to email me if you should need something additional. I can send you links and any additional information or questions that may occur after. Okay. Thank you all for having me. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.